Morning, class. This is Mr. Peralt. In this lesson, we're going to talk about density. Density is probably the most important intensive property. An intensive property is, well, any property where the amount or quantity of material doesn't really matter. And in this lesson, we're going to show this little triangle, which kind of helps illustrate the different relationships between density, mass, and volume. So let's proceed. So here we have our equation in its typical form. I'll put a little box around it, where the density of an object is equal to the mass divided by the volume. And in our triangle, you can kind of see that. I'll highlight this in a blue color, where the density of an object is equal to the mass divided by the volume. Now, of course, we can rearrange this equation using some basic algebra. If we were to multiply both sides by the volume, we can actually solve for the mass of an object. So the mass of an object is equal to, well, the density times the volume. And again, if we want to rearrange, we can just use some very basic algebra skills and divide both sides by the density. And we can find that the volume of an object equals the mass divided by the density. So being able to manipulate this equation, very helpful. And if you know what you're looking for in a problem, whether you're solving for density, mass, or volume, you could easily use this triangle to, help find that unknown term. So let's look at a few examples. So I have three practice questions. Here it says that osmium is a very dense metal. What is the density if the mass is 50 grams? Okay, so our density is mass per volume. They tell us in the question that our osmium is 50 grams. And the volume of our osmium is 2.22 centimeters cubed, which is a volume. So if we want to solve for the density of this metal, we simply divide the two numbers. So 50 divided by 2.22. We have a density of about 22.5. Well, what's the unit on this number? Well, notice how the units, they were different. They never changed. The units on a density is always a mass per volume. So we would just leave those units alone. So our correct answer is 22.5 grams per cubic centimeter. Let's try another problem. What if, instead of asking for density, what if they're asking for volume? So this practice question says, what volume of silver? Okay, so if we want to know the volume, we're going to use a different equation. The volume of an object, V, the volume is equal to the mass divided by the density. So in the question, they tell us that our silver is exactly 2,500 grams. They gave us the density of 10.5. 10.5 grams per cubic centimeter. Now, in this particular problem, I want to bring attention to those units because the gram will cancel gram. So grams divided by grams. The only unit left standing is your volume, cubic centimeters. So when you calculate the volume of your silver, that will be your final unit. So let's go ahead and divide those two numbers. And we calculate a volume, and we'll do a little bit of rounding, of about 238 cubic centimeters. Put a box around it, that's your final answer. Let's look at one other practice question. And in this last practice question, we've already solved for the density of an object. We solved for the volume. So of course, in my last example, we want to solve for the mass. So it says that the density of octane, which is a primary component of gasoline, is about 0.702 grams per milliliter. What is the mass in grams? Okay, so in this problem, we want to know the mass. The mass of an object is equal to the density times the volume. So I'm going to use parentheses just to kind of separate things, try to keep it neat. Our density is 0.702